A lot of Canadians would like to be able to just hop the pond, live and work in the United Kingdom, or head down under and live and work in Australia or New Zealand. And likewise, many citizens from those countries would love to come here and work in the Great White North. Well, a new group wants to see legislation formed between these four countries to loosen the restrictions on visas and work permits. James Skinner is the founder and executive director of the Commonwealth Freedom of Movement Organization, and he joins us now in Studio 10 to talk further about this. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
What kind of freedom of movement agreement would you like to see in place between Australia, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, Canada?
So the freedom of movement that we are proposing is similar to what is currently available within the European Union. So the EU, basically consisting of about 30 or so member countries, all have freedom of movement between each other. So, for example, a citizen from Italy can live and work and reside indefinitely if they choose. In Spain, for example, a Spanish citizen can live and work, permanently in the United Kingdom if they wish. And it's also similar between the Trans-Tasman travel arrangement between Australia and New Zealand. So they have an informal agreement whereby New Zealand citizens can live and work freely in Australia and vice versa. And that's what we would like to see between the UK, Canada, Australia and New Zealand eventually. How
likely is to get all four nations on board?
It's going to be tricky. It's going to be, certainly it's not going to be something that's going to be done overnight. It's going to be something that's going to take a while to do. But very recently we released a petition online, which is going to be submitted to the four governments. And there's been, within about 2 weeks, we had just under 25,000 signatures to achieve free movement between the four nations. And just from personal experience of living in Australia and also obviously living here in Canada as well, there's been a lot of support for what we are advocating. And I believe, yes, of course, it's going to take some time. It's going to take a while to actually get, achieved. But at the same time, I think it will inevitably happen at least by the end of the decade is what we're hoping.
Why just those four? Why not all Commonwealth nations?
So basically, the four countries we proposed, very similar in numerous ways. For example, they share the same head of state, Queen Elizabeth II. They share the same native language. They share the same Westminster parliamentary style system. They share the same common law legal system. They share, similar economic growth rates, similar crime control prevention, similar respect for human rights. Basically, as a lot of people have said before, we are virtually the same people. The only thing that divides us is the cover of our passports. And that's something I truly believe in. And we just have to make sure that, we're all very similar and on the same page in terms of those aspects.
Now, you mentioned you obviously grew up in the United Kingdom.
Yes.
Worked in Australia, now living in Vancouver.
Yes.
How did your experience influence you to form this group and advocate for change?
It's a bit of a sensitive issue, really. I left the UK in 2011 and went to Australia. To cut a long story short, I won't bore you with the details, but I basically made a new life for myself in Australia. I went to Melbourne and I fell in love with the place.
That's not hard to do.
It's not at all. Absolutely, as anybody listening will know. And of course, I established a job for myself with a good salary, a good circle of friends. I integrated within society that, as best as I could. And, like I say, I fell in love with the place. It came to the time where I wanted to apply for permanent residency. And basically the options and the opportunities available for me were just not available. It was too difficult to do. And same with Canada as well. I love Vancouver. I absolutely love the place. I've created a job here for myself with a great salary, great circle of friends. I've been clean as a whistle since I've been here, have not done anything wrong. I've integrated to the best of my abilities, and yet at the same time the options for applying for permanent residency are very, very limited for me, to the point where it's pretty unlikely that I will actually attain permanent residency. And I honestly wish I could say this only applies to me. But this applies to thousands of Commonwealth citizens like me throughout the world as well. Two friends of mine, both from Calgary, Canadian citizens, living in the United Kingdom right now, fallen in love with London, love the place. Again, cut a long story short, they are not eligible to stay. And within 4 months, they now have to head back to Calgary because they can't stay.
Okay, so what is the major challenge here?
The major challenge is basically we need to get people on board with what we are advocating. That's, we as an organisation are promoting the free movement for citizens of the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia and New Zealand to live freely and work freely between each other's countries, which is not something that is out of the ordinary. What barriers,
so, have we put up amongst ourselves now?
Obviously, from personal experience, the barriers at the moment are simply quite challenging immigration processes. Not just myself, but Canadian citizens, Australian citizens, and New Zealand citizens. If we want to live and work freely between each other, at the moment, we currently have to go through the long process of obtaining sponsorship, or we have to go through the long process of marriage or something along those lines. And it's very difficult. And what we're advocating is not something out of the ordinary. This is something that's been done within the European Union between, virtually 30 countries of a population of 500 million citizens who have the right to live and work freely between each other. And it's also been done with Australia and New Zealand as well, with the Trans-Tasman Travel Arrangement. Those two countries can live and work freely between each other. So what we're proposing with 4 Commonwealth countries, who have very close Commonwealth ties. We've had that Commonwealth tie for generations and decades in the past. We've stuck together through thick and thin. Like I say, share the same head of state, the same native language, the same respect for the common law. It's not something something completely out there that we're proposing.
So you started this petition, and you're just, I think, 144 signatures short of your 25,000. What do you do with it when you hit 25,000? Where do you send it?
So 25,000 is the ideal number that we would like to hit, which we believe will be actually attained very, very shortly. I mean, obviously, it's not too far away now. So obviously, the main objective that we have for this petition is to release it to the governments of the UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. Obviously, this is a time-sensitive issue because, as you already know, Canada has an election coming up. And
I heard about that.
Yeah, for sure. And in the same in the UK as well. We currently have an election coming up in May as well. So at the moment, it stands a bit, shall we say, fruitless to release it just before an election when there could be a complete parliamentary change. But we are intending to release it to the government of New Zealand later this week, to our contacts there, also to our contacts within the Australian Parliament. And then once the UK election has been finalised in May, we're going to release it to our contacts in the UK. And then finally, once the Canadians have their election, we're going to release it to the Canadian Parliament as well. So all 4 countries will inevitably be exposed to this petition and realise what we are campaigning for.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens, James. All the best with it. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much for having me.
James Skinner, founder and executive director of the Commonwealth Freedom of Movement Organization.